San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl losers. How are we going to get the Niners? That's what they were. It's a descriptive term, you see.
Yeah.
Let's go. How are we going to fix the San Francisco 49ers? We have Brock Purdy under contract.
We do.
Eating ramen noodles, rooming with multiple teammates. He's making no money the next couple of years. Golden opportunity for us to build the roster around him.
And it's still, like, what is it, at least a year away from being able to get more money as well. Like, they can't, even if they wanted to, they couldn't give him a contract for another year.
Spend all the money around Brock Purdy.
Meanwhile, Joe Montana's out there, like, still balling out with his billionaire lifestyle. Like, he's got it made. He's like 60s. Brock Purdy's current quarterback.
Yeah, win
Super Bowl caliber quarterback.
Win 4 Super Bowls.
Can't get any money.
Yeah, Joe won 4.
Yeah.
Brock's won 0.
Yeah, we did that back in the 80s when there was no money.
All right, what are we looking at for the Niners?
What are we looking at with the Niners?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. They got a lot of draft picks. They don't have a lot of cap space. They've actually... So they're not in a position where... They're not like the Chargers, right, where there's like 4 or 5 guys that they're probably going to get cut because they actually save them a ton of money. But they do all of a sudden have a bunch of guys with a giant cap number in addition to Brock Purdy earning nothing.
Yeah, it's the whole where you deploy the resources. So remember last year, I don't think we anticipated the Niners being huge free agency players, and then they go out and sign Javon Hargrave for a massive number. It's like, dude, they're already loaded on the defensive line.
Yeah.
And since that point, they traded for Chase Young and Randy Gregory, and they just kept going and going and going and almost got him there as far as the D-line goes. And now they have this Brandon Ayuk situation as well, where they have to figure out his future. Ayuk might be a little upset with the team. I don't know. And Ayuk emerged this year as one of the best all-around receivers in the NFL. And I think it's a fair question. They already locked up Deebo Samuel a couple of years ago. It's a fair question to say, who would you rather have, Ayuk or Samuel, especially with Deebo, the way he's been used as a running back and the way he plays from an injury standpoint. I think that's a fair question if you're the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, I spent all last offseason rather, saying teams should be on the phone offering their first-round draft pick for Brandon Ayuk. And maybe the 49ers would turn it down every time, but if you need a wide receiver, particularly a number 1, you should make that phone call. Like, at least make them turn it down, right? If you are, a team picking somewhere in the middle of the first round, you should absolutely pick up the phone, dial John Lynch, offer him your pick, and make him tell you no, right? And maybe he will, but you should not doing that. I feel like is just not doing your due diligence. It's not turning over every stone, etc. I feel the same way this year. Like, people are going to be talking about T. Higgins with the franchise tag. I think Brandon Ayuk is a better player than T. Higgins and certainly more versatile. So if you're in need of wide receiver and you don't pick in the top 10 where you're going to get a shot of one of those top guys, do the same thing. Force them to make that decision. And if Ayuk is getting a little bit more upset, maybe he's more inclined to agitate for that and help you out by saying, hey, whatever team is interested in me, I actually want to go there now.
So the two things at play here is I don't know, do you have enough money to pay Brandon Ayuk in a year?
Probably. So you look at they are this fascinating, remember we were sort of saying, when you get a quarterback, the quarterback takes up the biggest chunk of your salary cap, and then you have X number more big money contracts, right?
Yeah.
4 or 5, whatever that is that you can give out. Well, cap number this year, the 49ers have 5 players with a salary cap number of at least $22 million. George Kittle, Fred Warner, Eric Armstead, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Williams. Trent's is all the way up at $31.5 million. So 5 guys essentially with the monster contract. But then they've got 5 more that are over $10 million. Charvarius Ward, Javon Hargrave, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk. So Ayuk right now is getting paid basically half what Deebo Samuel is, or at least in terms of salary cap. It's half the cap hit. So if you assume this is the
paid his 5th-year option here.
Right.
Yeah.
If you assume that this is the last year that's going to happen, next year you're going to have to put something together similar to Deebo. That's okay as long as you're budgeting one of those other deals in that $20 million bracket going away.
Yeah.
Which it could. Like if this is the last year of Trent Williams, for example, or if Eric Armstead can be moved on from, then maybe that frees up that money. But that's the game they're playing. In addition to, at some point, Brock Purdy's contract is coming down the pipe.
So the thing that the Niners did a couple years ago, which I loved at the time, and let's rehash it. They drafted DeForest Buckner in the first round, got 4 years out of him, and right before re-signing him, they traded him for a first-round pick. It was pick number 14. They drafted, I don't know if they did it on purpose, but they basically drafted his direct replacement in Javon Kinlaw. Clearly, Kinlaw was not very good for his 4 years there. He's going to be a free agent now. They did not pick up his fifth-year option. He did not replace DeForest Buckner's production one-to-one. But you could still say it was the right move because you can't sign a Javon Hargrave without that freed up money, right? If you weren't going to pay DeForest Buckner, so you freed up all that money and you got a first-round pick back. Are they in a similar position here with Ayuk where you say, we got 4 years of great service out of Ayuk, now we're going to flip him for another first-round pick. Don't necessarily have to draft a receiver, but it could work out pretty well that way. And we're keeping the money free for other potential free agents and re-signings and Brock Purdy in a couple of years, but also getting a younger, cheaper at receiver. Could you make the same play? Again, 1-for-1, Javon Kinlaw did not replace DeForest Buckner.
Right.
But maybe the money that you saved from DeForest Buckner allows you to have Christian McCaffrey on the roster, have Javon Hargrave on the roster. It helps in other places. So to me, that's one of the options that they have here. Ultimately, though, I like Ayuk for the long term in the system.
Yeah, but the question becomes how many of those big deals can you carry at any given moment? Like
I would be ready to move on from. I would rather have Ayuk 3 years from now than Deebo Samuel. I think that's where I'm at.
Even though Deebo is like
style and I love Deebo. I just think that's going to run its course within the next couple of years.
Maybe
let him out and then keep Ayuk as my one.
I mean, I think they are capable of doing pretty much anything that they want in terms of the fact that they haven't paid Brock Purdy yet and won't for at least another year means they've got the creativity, they've got the flexibility to be able to keep Brandon Ayuk or flip him or let him walk. But this is all the kind of the difficult tightrope act of managing a roster, if you're like a contending roster. So you could pay Brandon Ayuk this offseason, keep him there for the long term, and then figure out which of those big contracts is going to be coming to its conclusion, whether it's Trent Williams or Eric Armstead or whatever. Alternatively, teams picking in the middle of the first round. Like if the Indianapolis Colts called up with pick 15 and said, hey, we'll give you pick 15 and maybe some other bells and whistles for Brandon Ayuk, or if Jacksonville with pick 17 made the same phone call. Like, there are trades, I think, that would be difficult to turn down for the 49ers if you were looking at this and saying, what is the optimal strategy for this roster? Because that would enable you to get away before you have to pay him the big money, and you could do what they did with the Kinlaw Buckner thing, even though it didn't work. Or a better example, maybe what the Vikings did with Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson. Yeah. Like, you get rid of Stephon Diggs, you get the first-round pick, use the first-round pick on Justin Jefferson, you end up better and cheaper. I mean, there's an argument that the 49ers could do that with Ayuk.
The Ravens did it with Marquise Brown, but just not a like-for-like position, right? You got rid of Marquise Brown, got another first-round pick, you got potentially an elite starting center in Tyler Linderbaum, basically, for him. Again, I like that strategy overall. I also, if I'm the Colts or Jags, now that you bring both of them up, I love that move for them as well.
Sure.
To be the team on the receiving end of Brandon Ayuk. If they did it for 15, is Brock Bowers available there? And you got Bowers to add to Kittle and another tin cup weapon? I mean,
or even if who knows what the draft is going to look like by the time you get to that spot. But let's say it panned out this way where you flip Brandon Ayuk to Indy or Jacksonville, and somehow Rome Odunze is still on the board at that spot. Like you trade in Brandon Ayuk and the contract that team is going to have to pay him to get Rome Odunze on the start of his rookie deal for a fraction of the cost. And maybe he's not as good, maybe he will be, but those are the kinds of things that a front office could do for the long-term health of the roster to make sure that they have as much flexibility going forward as possible.
No, I like it.
Or they just pay him this offseason.
Yeah, or you just pay him. I mean, so those are interesting decisions for the Niners. As you mentioned, I think ton of draft picks. They got 4 in the top 100. Last 2 drafts from San Francisco, they got Jair Brown last year in the 3rd round. That was their first pick 87.
That was the only pick or the only draft last year where all of the consensus, like draft graders, hated it. The only draft.
But it's like the nature of it, because your first pick was 87. So that's like, we talked about this during our draft recaps all the time. Nobody's grading on a curve, and they're not saying, how well did the Niners do relative to the picks they had?
Even relative to the picks they had, it was a weird draft.
Oh, was it? Yeah. I mean, Jair Brown was the one guy that contributed a little bit, and of course, Jake Moody, a kicker. But even from 2022, their top pick there, they didn't have a first that year. Drake Jackson hasn't really panned out great to this point. Guys like Tyrion Davis-Price, Danny Gray, Spencer Burford has been a starter. So they've basically gotten 2 starting caliber players, or 2 starters over the last 2 years, if you don't include your kicker. So this is kind of a big draft. And again, even the year before, Trey Lance, Aaron Banks, Trey Sermon, Ambry Thomas, not a ton. They did steal Hufanga that year. In other words, to future-proof this roster, this is a big draft for them, I think. They haven't gotten a ton of contribution with a lot of draft capital the last couple of years. 4 picks in the top 100.
Right.
That's a good place to fill many of the potential problems, future problem spots here on the Niners.
The big thing I think for this team is you look at the roster overall. It's really good. It's one of the top rosters in the NFL. The biggest question is, like, is the offensive line actually sustainable at this level, or do we need to make some serious changes there, because eventually the thing is going to collapse around us? Like, the line right now is Trent Williams, who's playing as well as any offensive lineman in the NFL since he got there, and 4 other guys who have various shades of like average to below average.
I don't think our grades are wrong there. I mean, I trust the overall analysis of it, and I think maybe lost in the Brock Purdy conversation is, we've made excuses for other players when they don't have great pass protection. Purdy's produced without great pass protection. I would rather improve that if I'm the Niners, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think tackle's in play if they stick in the late first. And again, playing this Ayuk game, like if they stole another first rounder in a trade somewhere, tackle, receiver, they could fill both of those spots in the first round potentially, tackle and receiver.
Right.
Like we've done with other teams.
And by the way, as great as Trent Williams is, he's 35 heading on 36. Like at some point he's going to reach the end. We're reaching the point now where at the minimum you need to start planning for life beyond Trent Williams.
So the other part is we could keep Ayuk and another team that's trench heavy, offensive and defensive line in this defensive line, because they want to have 8 deep, and Cleveland Ferrell and Chase Young and Kevin Givens and Javon Kinlaw are all free agents. They have heavy investment in Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, but we want to get younger there, so we attack offensive and defensive line essentially from a depth perspective. That's how we're drafting. That sound good?
Mm-hmm.
If we're making the decision, do you want to pay Ayuk or do you want to trade him? If that opportunity, like if you had pick 15 or you could pay him.
It always depends what that trade looks like. I mean, the Eagles traded what was that, 2018, something like that? A mid-first round pick, but they also traded a 3rd rounder as well, and they picked up the contract. If I was San Francisco and I was able to get pick 16 and a 3rd round pick, and somebody else was going to pick up the tab for Ayuk's contract, I think I would probably take that deal and bank on my chances of being able to draft not a Diggs to Jefferson replacement, but like a close enough replacement that I can lean on Debo, Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, just other players.
Again, I think those moves make sense over the course of time for the organization, right? Get 4 good years out of a first-round pick, get another first-round pick for him. Over time, I do think that works because the money gets spent elsewhere. Anything else you would do with the Niners here?
I think I would like to see them invest pretty significantly in the offensive line across the board. So both draft guys, but also hit that, mid-level free agent market where you can get starters that won't break the bank.
All right. I like it. Michael Onwenu?
Michael Onwenu, Robert Hunt would be interesting in that offense. He's already good. That feels like the kind of system that could propel him to the moon and make him look like an all-pro.
I think a guy like Ezra Cleveland, too, even though he dropped off last year, is still probably better than Aaron Banks,
right,
who's there. What I'm curious about, though, is I always talk about the year 3-4 breakout for offensive line, that they're in that. Colton McKivitz and Aaron Banks are like in that range when they should continue to progress. So just the experience could work for them and make them better on paper. But I'd look to all those potential upgrades, though. Niners fixed?
Yeah.
Winning the Super Bowl next year.